In Peru, police repression continued against the protesters demanding Dina Boluarte's resignation and the release of Pedro Castillo. Also in Russia, President Vladimir Putin said the economy's performance has exceeded the government's expectations. And the Nepalese authorities resumed rescue efforts to recover the 4 remaining bodies after Sunday's plane crash with 72 people aboard. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. And these are the news. In Peru, hundreds marched through Lima once again over the weekend, demanding the resignation of President Dina Boluarte and protesting for the nearly 15 Peruvians who have been killed by police and military forces at the demonstrations in the past weeks. Hundreds of Peruvians gathered at the capital city to march from the historical center to the Miraflores district. The demonstrators set off from the downtown San Martin Square with signs calling for the president's resignation, the holding of early elections for 2023, and an end to repression. Surrounded by dozens of shielded police officers, they marched towards the Kennedy Park in the Miraflores district. Mobilizations from other provinces within the country are expected to arrive in Lima in the next few days. In Peru, 71% of the population rejects the government of Dina Boluarte, according to figures from the Institute of Peruvian Studies. According to its latest survey, President Dina Boluarte and the Congress are highly disapproved by the citizens in the country, and most of them believe that law enforcement have used excessive force in the handling of the protests against the government and the parliament. Also, the study consulted the population and determined that approximately 71% of Peruvians disapprove of the way in which Boluarte is conducting her government. On the other hand, 88% of the population disapproves of the Congress performance, while only 9% approves it. Let's move on to other topics. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva dismissed the top executives of Empresa Brasileira de Comunicação, responsible for the government's media. The media company will be now run by journalist Karian Costa, a career civil servant who served as employee representative of the state-owned company's board of directors. The new top official will have the mission of leading the transition process for the new management to be implemented in the next months. According to the media reports, the unexpected replacement of the company executives arose as a result of the way the media entity reported the invasion and vandalism perpetrated on January the 8th by the radical followers of the defeated President Jair Bolsonaro. And during an interview for TeleSUR, 7 years after her arrest, indigenous leader Milagros Sala pointed out that her arrest was perpetrated and prepared to dismiss those who worked to help the unemployed Argentinians after the privatizations of the 90s in the country.
My arrest wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a question of Morales coming up with it because he had political problems with me. It was all a setup, because they had to overthrow the organization that had worked very hard and had raised the comrades who had been left without work in 2001 and in the 90s. Let's not forget that at that time companies were privatized, many state companies were left in the street, railroads were also dismantled, and at that time there was no political party. Not even the state had taken care of the unemployed.
The indigenous leader, Milagros Sala, assured that although she did not want the pardon a year ago, she now dreams of being held accountable before the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, since the regular justice system in Argentina failed to give her this opportunity.
Look, a year ago I didn't want a pardon, and today I would like a pardon. Do you know why? because I dream of one day sitting in front of the Inter-American Court and being held accountable. I want to give an account. I want to account for what they allegedly tell me I have stolen. I want to give an account to the people. Yes, because unfortunately, with the justice that some of us have believed in, it didn't happen.
The indigenous leader also denounced the toll her arrest had on her family.
My family has been destroyed. My husband is very sick. Well, my son is also very sick. My grandson is still suffering the consequences of this, of my detention. They completely disarmed my family. And they also disarmed the Tupac, but nevertheless, our Tupac comrade resisted these 7 years, and they are still marching. Today, they are still marching in the streets of Jujuy, despite the fact that many believed that just because they had me, the Tupac was going to disappear.
The Argentinian government denounced the breach by the International Monetary Fund of its commitment to review the costs of the conflict in Ukraine for the South American country. Argentina's Minister of Economy, Sergio Massa, believes that the IMF violates its obligations to the South American country. Argentina closed 2022 with a 94.8% inflation rate, one of the highest in the last 32 years. Massa mentioned that Argentina has complied with the program. However, the IMF has not complied with the countries that paid the cost of the conflict with its economy. The official told local media that Alberto Fernandez's administration renegotiated a loan of approximately $44 billion US. So let's take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other studies coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. In Spain, thousands of healthcare workers returned to the streets of Madrid on Sunday to protest against the dismantling of the public health care by conservative regional government of Isabel Ayuso. With banners that read SOS Public Health and Stop Privatization, the demonstrators departed from the Ministry of Health in Madrid and marched towards the Queen Sofia Museum Square. They condemned the shortage of personnel and criticized what they consider to be a favoritism shown by regional authorities towards private healthcare providers. In this regard, they demand better working conditions to avoid the overloaded care that hinders the provision of primary care to the people. In Portugal, public school workers marched this Saturday in Lisbon to demand better salaries, higher budget for education, and to protest against student selection process. The demonstrators were summoned by Portugal's Union of All Professionals to the central Marquês de Pombal Square. According to the complaints, the march demanded the resignation of Education Minister João Costa. Protesters also requested that Socialist Antonio Costa's government listen to their demands after almost 20 years of delays in improvements. Educators have scheduled a meeting with the Education Minister on January the 20th to discuss the future of public education in the country. And the Royal College of Nursing, Britain's largest nurses union, will stage a new day of strikes in February if there is no progress in talks with the government. The union said on Saturday that in this case the number of staff taking part in the measure will be twice as high. Salary disputes have intensified amidst the rising cost of living in the country. The union demands a salary increase equivalent to inflation plus 5% to avoid an exodus of National Health Service personnel. On December 15th and 20th, the country's nurses held two massive strikes, and the unions estimated that some 100,000 people participated. And the German police suppressed violently on Saturday a demonstration against the expansion of an open-pit coal mine in Luthera in western part of the country. The march was organized in support of the activists occupying the abandoned site. Hundreds of anti-coal demonstrators tried to enter forbidden areas of the lignite mine when clashes broke out between the protesters and security forces. Dozens of injuries were reported among the demonstrators due to dog bites and water cannons. At least 20 activists were taken to a hospital. Now we move on to other topics. Mexico's National Center for Disaster Prevention issued an alert due to the increased activity of Popocatépetl volcano. In the last 24 hours, the activity of one of the 6 volcanoes identified as high risk has increased, reporting 214 exhalations, resulting in ash and 2 explosions followed by steam and volcanic gases. Therefore, the Prevention Center called on citizens not to stay near the crater and of this area due to the danger posed by falling volcanic fragments. Meanwhile, the General Coordination of Civil Protection announced that the people should be watchful of their instructions since ashfall is expected in the next few hours in Puebla and Tlaxcala states. In the United States, deaths rise to 9 after several tornadoes hit the southeastern part of the country. Authorities reported that the most affected states were Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama. Efforts to find people trapped under the devastated area continue in the region. Weather reports forecast more tornadoes, and the state of alert has been declared to protect some 35 million citizens. Meanwhile, the government of President Joe Biden approved a disaster declaration for the state of California, which has also felt the disastrous effects for the severe storm. In the Philippines, authorities raised the death toll following floods in 42 provinces of the country to 27. The National Risk Education and Management Council also said that 11 people were injured and 3 others are still missing. Floods affected more than 614,000 people, displacing over 112,000 of them. More than 1,200 houses, 155 infrastructures, and 13 hectares of agricultural land were also damaged. The government declared a state of calamity in 31 cities and municipalities, many of which are still without power. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. Russian President Vladimir Putin declared that the performance of the country's economy has exceeded the government's expectations. The Russian president said to the press that the economy is more stable than the forecasts had predicted, not only that of his opponents, but also of his own specialists. Putin assured that the country's inflation rate has had a satisfactory trend and that unemployment remains at an all-time low. The head of the state also said that the national inflation could decrease from 11.9% to 5% during the current year, and congratulated the military for their performance during the special military operation in the Donbas region since February 24, 2022. The Russian Defense Ministry denounced in a press release Saturday that Ukraine is preparing a large-scale provocation with the objective to frame Moscow. According to the statement, the provocation seeks to discredit Moscow's actions within the framework of the grain agreement, accusing Russia of creating a food shortage. The declaration states that Ukrainians are allegedly undermining a grain warehouse in the Kharkov region. The Russian Defense Ministry concluded that Kyiv is trying to put pressure on the West's public opinion with such high-profile provocations in order to guarantee new large-scale supplies of modern weapons and the military equipment for its armored forces. In Russia, authorities fully resumed transit on the Crimean Bridge after the terrorist attack committed in October 2022. Local authorities reported the resumption of the movement of cars and buses on the bridge, which had been suspended for repair and reconstruction works. Previously, on October the 8th, a truck exploded while crossing the bridge, causing the death of 4 citizens and the burning of 7 train tag cars. The Russian Federal Security Service reported that 12 people were behind the incident, including the head of the Central Intelligence Directorate of the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. And China launched a Long March 2D rocket from the Taiyuan Satellite Launch Center in the northern province of Shanxi, sending 14 new satellites into space. This was the 462nd flight mission using the Long March rocket series. The satellites, including Kilu 2 and Kilu 3, have entered their planned orbits. This consists of optical satellites, one high resolution and one wideband, both with payloads of optical imaging devices for Earth observation. The mission will provide the eastern Chinese province of Shandong with remote sensing services for land service, agriculture, forestry, environmental protection, as well as disaster prevention and reduction. In China, an explosion and a subsequent fire was reported on Sunday at a chemical plant in the province of Liaoning, leaving several workers injured. According to preliminary reports, the blaze occurred during the scheduled maintenance work. Local authorities said that several workers were injured and were taken for medical attention. Search and rescue efforts for other possible victims are underway. Authorities are still investigating the causes of the accident. Nepalese authorities resumed rescue efforts on Monday to recover the 4 remaining bodies after a plane crash on Sunday with 72 people aboard. Rescue teams returned to the crash site this morning, where they are trying to pull the 4 bodies out of a deep gorge, said Kashki District Chief Tek Bahadur. 68 lifeless bodies have so far been recovered after yesterday's crash of an ATR-72 aircraft, which crashed while covering the route between Kathmandu and Pokhara. The delivery of the identified bodies to their families started on Monday, while the bodies of the 15 foreigners will be airlifted to Kathmandu today. On Sunday, the Palestinian Health Ministry reported that Israeli security forces killed a Palestinian man in the West Bank. Ahmed Hassan Abdul Jalil Kakla, 45 years old, was shot in the neck with live ammunition near Silwad. Witnesses, quoted by Wafa, said the shooting was preceded by an argument between the man and Israeli soldiers who forced him to get out of his vehicle before shooting him at a point-blank range. The victim is the 4th Palestinian killed this week by Israeli forces and the 13th so far in 2023. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.